The ETF Analyzer risk page provides users with traditional and advanced mathematical tools to help assess risk. The general layout of this page shows tables and statistics on the left, with graphs on the right. First, we'll begin with some tips on using and controlling the charts, then explore in more detail what each section means. The chart on the top right is the historical price series for this ETF. The current market quote of $181.51 is close to the most recent price in our chart, which updates daily overnight. Just below this chart are the daily returns shown in black. We'll explain the red and blue lines in a moment. Notice the data history for these charts begins in 1993. Under Settings, let's change this so that only the most recent 2 years are loaded. Notice our price and returns graphs are now updated with only 2 years of history. Notice below Settings is a control, Show Dynamic Chart. Using the Dynamic Chart control, we can now hover over the charts to see any specific point in more detail. For example, on August 1st, 2013, we see that the price was $168.17 and the return level was a positive 1.15%. Below the charts, we find additional date controls. Specify specific date ranges, or use the slider to control date windows. Note the controls are restricted to our 2-year window selected under Settings. Longer histories can be made available, but they may take additional time to load using the Dynamic Chart feature. Now let's return to a more detailed explanation regarding each section of risk. Starting with the table on the top left, we'd like to point out the extreme loss potential at the 1% level. Today, this is minus 2.26%. We've focused on the 1% level since this matches our charts, but it may be changed under the Settings controls. This risk measure is perhaps the single most important to be aware of for any security that you analyze. This represents the 1% worst case loss potential based on today's risk level. This matches the most recent lower blue line and is called the expected shortfall. The upper blue line, with a value of positive 2.17%, matches the potential extreme gain reported. Risk levels indicate whether these extreme loss values are relatively high or low compared against its own history. Today's dial shows a level of 31, which is relatively low, but slightly higher than last month. This can provide a quick view as to whether risk is increasing or decreasing. The next section, Risk Exceedances, shows a comparison between two metrics: expected shortfall, which we previously identified as the lower blue line, and value at risk, which is represented by the lower red line. The exceedances table keeps a record of how many times the daily returns, shown in black, fall below or exceed the level indicated. On April 10th, the return of SPY was minus 2.12%, which is below the red value at risk line. This is an exceedance. Note this is not an exceedance for the risk level predicted by the blue line. The exact mathematical difference can be found in the education section, but for now it is helpful to point out two main differences. First, the red line value at risk calculations have made assumptions about return distributions that can underestimate the frequency of extreme losses. Second, the red line is less sensitive to recent risk information. To illustrate these points, let's change our time series to include the previous 7 years. The static return chart readily shows a blue line that is much more dynamic than the red. To further illustrate how the differences relate to exceedances, let's switch our chart to dynamic and concentrate on the 2008 financial crisis. Notice during this period that the red value at risk line had 10 to 20 exceedances during the October and November months. For events predicted to only occur 1% of the time, this risk measure poorly estimated the risk for that time period. Conversely, the blue expected shortfall measure did not have an exceedance during the same time period. This does not mean that the blue line will always predict more risk than the red line. In the late to early 2010 period, the red value at risk line still estimated a high level of risk, while at the same time, the blue, or expected shortfall line, observed less risk while still not incurring exceedances. Returning to our statistics, the next section reports on a number of risk-reward ratios. Hover over a specific metric to learn more. Under the dynamic charting feature, these metrics may be added or removed graphically. The next section presents sample statistics computed based on the most recent 2-year period. Included are max-min returns, average returns, skewness, kurtosis, and others. Finally, at the very bottom of the risk page is a 3-dimensional view of the return distribution. The top left shows the negative returns, top right, positive returns. Changes in peaks or width of the distribution can be observed quickly. The complete static distribution is shown on the bottom. This completes the ETF Analyzer risk page.